All right. I'd like to welcome Ryan Garko, Detroit Tigers Vice President of Player Development, to the Days of Roar podcast. The Tigers hired Ryan in September 2021 to lead the player development department, and a lot of good things have happened in this organization since then. I don't think that's a coincidence either. We talk about Riley Green as the straw that stirs the drink with the Tigers on the field, but how about Ryan Garko and his PD department as the straw that stirs the drink throughout the organization? The Tigers are developing players better than ever before. So let's give credit to Ryan and his team for that. Now, before joining the Tigers, Ryan worked for the Los Angeles Angels, Los Angeles Dodgers, and coached at Stanford. He also played college baseball at Stanford, winning the Johnny Bench Award as the top catcher in college before embarking on a 6-year MLB career, playing more than 450 games. He's done so many things in baseball, all before the age of 45, and throughout the past few years, he has been making a huge impact on the Tigers. We're thankful to have Ryan on the Days of Roar podcast for the first time. Ryan, I know that was a long introduction, but thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to talk. Appreciate the introduction, and I'll probably say it's a lot today. We're lucky to have a lot of really good people in this department working really hard, and it's been a fun 2.5, third season into it, just trying to get players better every day.
For sure. Obviously, the guy that we got to ask you about, Jackson Jobe, somebody that fans are already looking at as a potential option for the Tigers in 2024, maybe later on in the season. He just went down with a left hamstring strain. I'm not sure how much you can say about that, but can you walk us through for him, maybe where he's at in the recovery process, his development last year, what the development plan is like this year, especially coming off the back injury that he had that limited him to less than 80 innings last season? Like, where does he go from here? How have you guys tried to build him up and take care of the body?
Yeah, it's been fun watching Jackson grow from a young, pretty raw, young, not very filled out high school draft pick with tons of potential into, I think, a young man that's going to have a really big impact in Detroit really soon. He's filled out. I mean, the amazing thing, I think it was last year in the fall league, I'm kind of just used to Jackson being a high school kid and standing next to him and feeling bigger than him. And this spring training, I stood next to him. I feel like he's grown a couple more inches, and his shoulders are broader than mine. And I'm looking up at him now, and it's like, whoa, like, this isn't a kid anymore. This is a young man. So in terms of the body, he's filled out. He's really strong. He's so athletic. One of the things I think Jackson shapes, and he's so coachable because he's so athletic. He was a high school shortstop. I think a lot of times, we joke around how unathletic a lot of pitchers are. He's the opposite, like an incredible athlete and able to make quick adjustments. The hamstring strain, we're digging in on sort of the why behind it. He's down in Lakeland now, where we have the most resources. We have a pool where he can get in. He got in the pool already and started the rehab. We anticipate, a pretty normal recovery. It's something he'll have to work diligently to get through. But I think the most important thing is we just want to make sure the hamstring's 100%, so that he doesn't change his throw at all when he does come back. And we, sometimes a pitcher, if they have those lower half injuries, they can change their throw a bit. We'll get through it, and we trust our rehab group to take care of Jackson, get him back on the field at 100%. I think in terms of the stuff, I mean, we all saw it this spring training. It was a massive jump. I think you had guys like, Skubal and Mize and Manning watching him, and it is different. I mean, we've all been around, even for someone like Skubal's different too, and Jackson, it's the command, it's the shapes, it's the velocity, it's the arm action and just the arm speed on the pitches. I think the slider gets a lot of attention, but the changeup and the cutter have become really, really strong secondary pitches. So it's a true 4-pitch starter arsenal. And the changeup really, I think, is going to give him weapons against left-handed hitters that will, keep him pretty platoon neutral. So, I mean, there's still work to do. Like, I thought he was kind of coming around in Double-A. The last 7 innings were really good. We were hopeful that Double-A hitters would sort of help make him, bear down. He wants it right now, and he's going to get there quickly. And he was starting to dominate Double-A hitters, so we'll get him back healthy, get him back there, Erie, and just let him keep pitching. I thought him going to the fall league and finishing here at 80 innings was important. We want to try to get him to 100 this year, at least, and I think we can still do that even with this setback.
For sure. Well, it's really good to know that he's going to be on the road to recovery, and it seems like the hamstring strain is something mild, and he'll be able to bounce back from it. I want to ask about other players, but first we got to just jump into some developmental things that we're generally curious about, like, when you come in, you take over, and you're, walking in the door September 2021, what developmental philosophies are you bringing with you that, you've allowed to kind of play out, or that you've implemented, over your time with the Tigers?
Yeah, you look back on it now. I think one of the blessings that we had coming in, it was a decision that Al Avila at the time made, was to wipe the slate pretty clean. And I'm very staff focused. I think our scouts and Scott and Jeff, they handle the acquisitions, right? Like our motto is like, send us anybody, like let's just get them better. Like let's just let's make players better. That's our job. Like pretty simple. So our thought though on the staff is, as players do come and go, and as we develop them and hopefully launch them to the big leagues, or we use them in a trade, and they can help us out in some type of trade or anything, just creating value with players, finding staff that, I think, two things. Number one, super forward thinking. We're going to leave no stone unturned. We want to be on the cutting edge of whatever is going on in the industry today. And number two, just a tireless work ethic of either researching what's next for our group or pouring ourselves into players. Just the care level, the attention to detail, staff development. I mean, we spend just as much time developing our coaches as we do our players at times. And I'm pretty blessed to have a really good staff around us that I think, I mean, look, like, we talked about Jackson already, but then I think you look at someone like Lyle Lockhart, who we've got in a pretty small trade for with the Dodgers. Like, we pour just as much energy and effort into a guy like Lyle as we do Jackson, and we take a lot of pride in that. The other thing was, it's probably two other things. Second thing is just individualized player plans. We talk all the time about, like, every player that gets drafted that makes it to pro ball is really good at something. Like our scouts, like, they don't get this to this point of their career without being really good. Like, let's lean into what makes them really good. And then around the edges, like in the margins, find, like, how do we, like, round out the player as best we can, and how do we do it individualized? So that kind of blends into the third thing that we're still trying, like, we're still pouring resources into it, is the performance, what we call, like, the performance side of things, which is medical, strength and conditioning, nutrition, mental skills, mental performance, blending those, rest and recovery, sleep, like those, that sort of nebulous, like, performance area, where every place I've been, I think that is the area amongst the other 29 teams where we can be elite. And I also think, like, players feel that, and, like, making sure players, they feel taken care of here. When they see players from other clubs, like, they tell them, like, hey, they're taking care of us. Like, we stay in nice hotels, we eat well, we have 2 trainers at every level. We're going to start having multiple strength coaches at every level. Like, our mental performance group is always checking up on us. The players feel that. I mean, the baseball is going to happen every day. We have to play every night at 7:00. How we prepare those guys, and then how they recover and get ready for the next game. Like, we have a ton of influence over that. And I think that is an area we're going to keep working on, and where we have gained a lot of ground.
So the performance side is what you probably can control. I mean, obviously, some other thing, I'm curious about the process of building a system. I have something I call process and profile. Process is how you guys get better, and profile is, are there types of players or types of skills that the Tigers emphasize more than others? So, I mean, it's in other sports, this happens all the time. It's like, if a guy was a particularly good shooter in hoop, or maybe he runs well, doesn't run routes great as a receiver in the NFL. When you guys are looking for players, whether it's, in the draft, or even players are, you're playing 4 different leagues, 5 really, every night. So I'm sure you're watching other teams' players simultaneous to watching your own. So tell me a little bit about the process and the profile of being a Tiger minor leaguer, and how you look to acquire players.
I think, look, Scott Harris said it the day he was hired at his press conference. The dominate the strike zone mantra is, it's real. Like, it's real, and at every level, it's real every night. It's in every meeting we have, like every pregame meeting and every post-game review meeting we have with the hitter or a pitcher. The strike zone is still front and center, and I don't think that's ever going to change. And I agree with it, like, wholeheartedly. Like, when Scott talks about it, everything good or bad on a macro sense happens around the strike zone. So, like, our floor for a hitter, right, is are they, if you don't swing at strikes, it doesn't matter how much power you have. It doesn't matter how much bat speed you have. It doesn't even matter how good your contact ability is. Like, swinging at strikes is a foundational part of our offensive approach. So we talk about it in a lot of our review sessions and our player plans, like the pitches you swing at, which we also feel like, I truly believe like the hitter has complete control over that, right? So like I get to pick the pitch I swing. As good as pitching is now, as much stuff as guys have, and every throw is like all power all the time, like I still get to pick if I swing or not. So that is still foundationally what we talk about with our hitters most of the time. Now, like we definitely have hitters in our system that have a lot of power and a little bit of swing and miss, and we still look, those guys can still be very, very valuable players. We're going to lean into what, like I just said, into what the hitter does really well. Jose De La Cruz is a hitter in Lakeland. He has more power than maybe anybody on our major league team. Like we just got to get him to make better decisions, swing at strikes. And if Jose can just swing at more strikes and make more contact without losing the power, like that starts becoming like a super interesting player, right? It's like those are the kind of conversations. And we have guys who put everything in play, they make good decisions, they just don't have any power. That's Wenceel Perez, right? Wenzel's goal 3 years ago in High A, West Michigan, was Kenny Graham. Just really, some of it was a swing change, some of it was an approach change, some of it was just a mindset of like, Wenceel, you're never going to leave West Michigan unless you can hit the ball harder. And just then it just becomes like coaches doing what they love to do and a player buying in. And he just kept getting better and better and carried it all the way through AAA. So, I mean, I think that's kind of the conversations we get to have every day. You know, pitching side, it's the same thing. Shapes and strikes is kind of the mantra, and then velocity is sort of like the third piece of that key. But again, like if you can't throw strikes, it's hard to move up through our system. We like to strike people out, but just as much we like not walking people and giving up free bases. And then, you know, one thing that we do talk about shapes. I think we have a pretty good idea of what shapes play in the major leagues, and then we can look at the shapes a pitcher is creating and sort of envision what that arsenal might look like as they move up to the higher levels. And Toledo with ABS now and how good the hitters are and the small strike zone, like gives us a really good look at how a pitcher stuff is going to play in the big leagues when we know hitters are going to bring them in the box and not chase.
I wanted to go back to something you were discussing about Wenceel Perez, and I think it lends itself to some things we wanted to talk to you about. The Tigers have some players in their system in a similar career arc that, you know, Perez was, which is stuck at lower levels, maybe more skill over production right now. And I think sometimes people don't truly appreciate the game is so difficult, but translating those skills and production on the field. I'll throw out a couple names early about that. You brought up De La Cruz being one. A lot of skills, hit and miss on the production because he's still learning how to hit strikes. But now let's throw in Campos and Santana going through a similar learning experience. Skills are there, especially Santana obviously knows how to walk, right? And can hit the ball pretty hard. Struggling to make consistent contact. Sometimes guys get it quickly. Sometimes guys take years. But talk a little bit about those two guys to add into the De La Cruz stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You know, a little different. Campos they're both young for their league, right? So we've been pretty aggressive with both of them. Campos, I think it really comes down to whether it's a contact point and these are just like, this is what we do every day, right? We talk about this all the time. He hits the ball on the ground too much, right? He hits the ball really hard, but he hits the ball on the ground a lot. He does make pretty good decisions and he does hit the ball hard. He just is, and like that's Justice Bigby 2-3 years ago, right? Just is very similar, just a lot of ground balls, but like really interesting. Like, hey, this guy, he's doing everything we like except for hitting the ball on the ground too much. And that's Roberto's still his challenge now. Is it a swing change? Is it an approach change? Like this is why the minor leagues exist, right? Our hitting coaches and him and our coordinators, like we talk all the time about, do we just try to set the contact point out in front more? And some nights he does that. And that's when we see him driving balls gap to gap. Is it something with his stance? Is it something with his setup? Like we have all kinds of tools that we can use to gauge like how we get him on plane and through the ball. And we try to be pretty objective. The one thing I really like about our hitting group is we can all watch video and start, thinking about, hey, like, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Sort of the more traditional hitting program that probably I played in, but Kenny Graham and his group we have Hawkeye now at every stadium, which is a pretty big investment from our ownership, that we can objectively see what really is happening with the player's load and with the bat. It'll track the bat. And so with Roberto, we just talk. It's like it's get on plane, stay on plane, get the ball in the air. Santana, it's pretty incredible. It is like great decisions, like you said, like the walks and just the swing decisions are great. And he does have power when he makes contact. He hits the ball hard and he pulls the ball in the air, which is kind of the opposite of Campos. Like Santana knows how to pull the ball in the air, which is hard to do. It's hard to do for young players. He's still young for the league. There's just some swing and miss. And I do think with Santana, it's a swing thing. It's a setup. It's the load. It's where the hands start and the bat's not, the bat gets in and out of the zone pretty quickly. And we have really good people working with him all the time on getting a move that gets his bat in the zone and keeps it there. He can at times just come across it a little bit. And as we work and as another young player, and so he's right where I think he needs to be. I wouldn't have changed anything that we've done with him because he clearly mastered, the FCL and the walks would have been, too high. So he's right where he needs to be. We've just got to find a swing that he can repeat, like find a repeatable swing that makes more contact. And he knows that. And he shows it. I think with both those guys, the exciting part is series by series. We look at it, last 7, last 14, last 30, when they start having these stretches that we're doing everything we asked for, then it starts becoming like, how do we do this over, 100 at bats and not 15 or 20?
Well, one thing that we talk about on this podcast all the time is, not what you can do sometimes, but what can you do all the time? And maybe not all the time, but most of the time, right? How do you take skills or things that a player can do sometimes and turn them into a consistency type of thing? And do you have any examples of that from your time with the Tigers where you've taken a player who, has some good skill sets, is able to do it sometimes, but then you really want to try to get him to do it most of the time, if not all the time?
Yeah, I think, the Big B's probably a good example of that, of a guy that it was a ground ball monster. And Kenny Graham should get all the credit. Like he kept on talking about like all the underlying metrics. We kind of call those like the granular metrics are really good, but the end result is not we're not getting what we're getting. Or, we talk about process versus outcomes a lot. And I think, Evan, what you're saying, is like the process is really good, but we're not seeing the outcome that we're hoping for. And we do, that's kind of how probably the most similar thing we do to phrase it like that. And so with Bigby, it just became, it's right. The coaches and staff, we have control before the game, and then we have control after the game. And the players, we just let them go play when the first pitch is thrown. So it was a lot of drill packages. We just try to create environments. Bigby or any of our hitters or pitchers, we Max Gordon's with us and came from Driveline, right? It's so much of it there is about creating environments where the player just makes the adjustment on his own. And so we try to practice as aggressively as possible before the games. Like the theory, I mean, it's not unique to us, but practice really, really hard, practice harder than game speed and in environments like faster and more difficult than the game, hoping that it makes the game a little bit easier so that could be, different machine work or different, just, angle machines or weighted balls or different kind of bats, like forcing Bigby to catch the ball out in front. And then on the backside, we just have our post-game review, which was pretty much every night showing Bigby like, hey, like, here's where you made contact tonight. Like, here was the result. And we can track that now. It's really cool. Some of the tools we have, like we have off, a home plate graph and then exactly where he made contact with the ball. And we had a zone like 6 to 12 inches out in front of the plate where we wanted contact. And our hitting coaches would review it with him every night and then just do it again the next day until he could feel without a coach's help, like where his contact point needed to be.
How do you know when changes in progress in a player is real? Whether that's a swing decision, whether it's approach, whether it's mechanical, when do you know when something is actually real?
We have a lot of times we just lean on, our analytics group. I mean, we know there are points where certain statistics or certain performance metrics stabilize. And so, something like WRC plus takes a lot of at bats to probably about 300 plate appearances to really start getting excited about. But there's other things like exit velocity, launch angle, exit velocity. Like there's things that usually hold once the player starts showing that at much faster clips. So we have stabilization rates for all of our metrics, and they kind of, then once we start getting, you try not to get too high or too low about a player. We have calls every week with our pitching and hitting group, And we do talk a lot about trends, both like long and short-term trends, but then always stay grounded in the stabilization rates of like where these stats become real. And we have, I'm a former player, former coach. I'm probably more traditional, and I always have like really good people around me. Pete Bransfield's our assistant director. Pete always draws us back to the math and the objective, numbers, what they really are tell us. So I think we have a really good balance of traditional, coaches and analysts in our group and we just try to, you talk about like, when do you move a guy, when do you send a guy down, or when do you change playing time? Like when we do really make those decisions, we take a lot of time and look at it from every angle.
I mean, you want to induce some failure in a player once they're mastering a level. So I would assume that goes into some of your decision making about when to promote them, because that's the next part of their growth level, right?
For sure. I mean, we talk a lot, dominate your league is a saying. We, when a player asks me like, why am I not moving? Like, and we have some metrics that pretty easily show a player like, hey, you're dominating your league or not. And I think most of our guys know them. And then kind of like we said with Jackson at the beginning, like the opponent will tell us a lot of times, like what if a player's in the right league, especially for our pitching, and then our big metric, one we really care about, is in zone miss. We get some of the chase, right? Like some young hitters chase. So we really, like we said, we want our pitchers to really be in zone, and we have a lot of markers, like an in zone miss being one of them. Usually projects success at the next level. The peripheral stats, again, like they really start telling us, again, like BABIP and exit velocity, like things can be a little deceiving in small samples, and sometimes we have to make decisions pretty quick. And again, we just try to hit it from all angles and make sure that the player is dominating the league before we move them.
All right, we're going to do an express round on a few player names. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. Look, for people that aren't familiar with Ryan Garko's career, he was a catcher at Stanford, and I think when you went into pro ball, you were a catcher too for a while, right?
Yeah, I caught all the way to AAA. I moved. Right. I moved in the big leagues. Yeah, for Victor Martinez signed a long deal, and I had to find a new spot. So, but
we do know that catchers are the Mensa members of baseball, right? I mean, catchers are the smart guys in baseball. I mean, look at AJ. Look at you. So I'm just curious, because catchers have a unique perspective about a lot of things about the game, especially if you call pitches back there. There's a whole chess part and thinking part of baseball that catchers do that a lot of other players don't do nearly as much as a daily part of their skill set and job. And I'm curious, listening to AJ talk about this, I'm curious how much impact being a catcher has on your philosophy of scouting your own players, developing player development things. I mean, catching gives you a lot of insight into a lot of things about baseball. I'm curious how it impacted your player development thought.
Yeah, for sure. You always talk about how many catchers, current managers, are former catchers, right? And I think AJ and I talk about this. Is it, the chicken and egg theory? Is it we all got stuck behind the plate because we showed at an early age that, we had a little bit better grasp of the game, or is it catching all those years helped us, become better, strategy, and kind of you're looking out and like seeing the whole field. I think it's a little bit of both, and I do think the one thing that I've really been that I enjoy, and I think I like to be able to do, is all the catching. Those of us that are catching, is like I think we can relate to pitchers, pitching coaches, pitching strategists, and just as easily as the hitting guys, and talk about offense and talk to that side of things. So I think one of the things that like so many managers so well in terms of game strategy or managing a bullpen, just talking to pitchers. Like pitchers are we have some of our outfielders, like they don't even want to talk to the pitchers just because the less you can interact with some of those guys, the better. So I think to be a catcher, you have to be a good communicator. Like you have to be able to handle a staff. You have to be able to work with your advanced group, and probably in some manner your front office. I mean, all I did with the Angels was our advance, and I was bringing all the information down from the office to the players and the catchers. It was Max Stassi and Kurt Suzuki were the best combo I have, and like those guys are both going to be in the game forever. Kurt's retired and working in the Angels front office, and it does seem natural. Like we talk all the time, just catchers in our system. Oh, like this guy will be a great coach, or this guy will be a great scout. And I think it's just all the interactions you have to have, the position forces you to have that help round out your ability to stay in the game when you're done.
Okay, now I'm curious because you just went into talking about yourself a little bit, and I know Mark asked the question, but I'm really curious as well. Like, did you always want to do player development stuff? Like, did you always want to run a department like this? Because you played, you've coached, you've managed in the minor leagues. Now you're leading a player development department. Were you drawn to that as opposed to staying in the dugout as a coach or a manager? Or do you maybe like the idea of juggling both, or maybe being able to have one foot in each avenue moving forward? Like, where did this kind of come from for you?
I think I have a real passion for player development. I do really like, I'll say, I guess all I'll say is in 2016, when I went to go work for the Dodgers, I think they were going through a very similar transition to what we did in Detroit in 2021, and that Gabe Kapler was hired. It was probably like a pretty old school group, in LA, and Gabe got to clean the slate and bring in a lot of new coaches. And I was fortunate to be one of them. And I watched that system transition into, it was fun. It was a fun group of guys. Like Chris Fetter was there, and Brandon Gomes. And I mean, there's a lot of coaches that have spread out. George Lombard was there. I mean, there were so many guys that have spread out and done other things. And I got a chance to be a head coach in college and go to Joe Madden's staff. And I think that this opportunity was so unique in that when it came up, it was, hey, like, we know we need to make some changes. You're going to get to hire people, like be pretty aggressive and be pretty creative in how you build out a system. And we're going to give you the resources that you want to do it. I think the uniqueness of this opportunity and it kind of came out of nowhere. I think when Al called, I certainly wasn't expecting it. And the more I started looking at the opportunity, and even Chris Ilitch's, wanting to develop from within and how to really have a sustainable team, like all of that, it just lined up. I think my time with the Dodgers, I had always had in the back of my mind, hey, if I ever get a chance to lead a department like that, where we have the freedom to be pretty aggressive and creative and bring people in from, we have former high school coaches, we have guys that have coached in a facility that have never put on a uniform in their life that are coaching in the upper levels and doing a great job. Like, we got to go out and hire and develop and promote some like really, really interesting and I think like super high ceiling staff. And that's what, so I just saw a lot of parallels to what we did in LA, and that was a lot of fun. And we're trying to do the same thing here.
With that being said, how has the player development department with the Tigers evolved since you joined in 2021? And then even then, like, how has it been enhanced since the Tigers hired Scott Harris as president of baseball operations, back in 2022?
Yeah. I think a lot of it just goes to, Scott's brought a whole new layer of ideas and challenges for us. Scott's one of the most, for me being a former player and, him being coming through as an executive, he's one of the most player-centric executives I've ever been around. And the player experience in Detroit, and then anybody that puts on a Tiger uniform, like, he's really emphasized the player experience. And so we've really doubled down on, when I talk about the individualization of player plans and of how we treat players. We want our players to brag to the other 29 teams, whether they're in low A or triple A, or obviously in Detroit, that the Tigers are pumping all the resources available into them. So some of that's just been technology. Food, things that are, infrastructure has been built out where if a player, feels like they need something, they're able to get in the tech cage in Lakeland, and we're on it right now. And we have specialists that came from a facility like Tread or in-house, a guy like Jeff Branson, who's been a major league coach, is now working in our hitting department. That we have experts on scene, on site in Lakeland to address things now. I think those types of things where players, we can't recreate the major league experience one-to-one in the minor leagues just because we have too many players, not enough staff, but we're trying to be pretty close. And Scott's given us all the support and resources we need to try to do that.
All right. We're going to play a little bonus round on players, because anybody listening to this podcast is probably already yelling and screaming at us that
okay.
They want to hear about a few players. So let's jump straight into it. First two right off the jump. Let's talk about Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal, and then we'll get to Jace Young.
Max He didn't get his first 10 at bats, and he was calling me, and he's like, "I'm gonna get it going." I was like, "Max, you got about 700 more, buddy. We're not worried." But really like what he's doing. I was just in Florida. I feel like I look pretty red on this camera, but his offense, obviously, we're all paying attention every day. His speed on the bases and his outfield defense is incredible to see in person. So I'm so excited. I think Tigers fans for a long time watching him play outfield in Comerica Park is going to be a joy for anybody, because he gets to the ball as fast as anyone I've ever seen play, and he's only 19 years old. Threw some guys out. Like, the arm is real. Like, when we say 5 tools, like, it really is 5 tools, because the defense, the speed, the arm, like, those are kind of hard to create. Like, you're just kind of born with those. Like, he has them. Love where the swing is at. I love his approach. I love his maturity. I think we don't even talk to him about power, because we don't want him to start trying to create it artificially. It's going to be there, though. He'd be a freshman in college right now somewhere. So I hardly think anybody would be that worried about a freshman's exit velos and things. And so we have time. That's going to come. I love, like I said, he's made some subtle changes to his hand setup. He's just learning. Like, the makeup is off the charts with Max. He's coachable. He's humble. He's hungry. So it's been a good start. Kevin McGonigal, after coming off the hamstring injury in spring training, he can hit. I mean, you're going to hear this over and over and over. He's really, he has a hitter's mindset. He's in the box, like, looking to hit the ball hard as soon as they throw it over the plate. Defensively, like, we're going all up the middle. So second and short. There's some other young shortstops there that we want to get some time there. We're going to play him at short for as long as we can. He looks really good there. I mean, amongst guys his age, he looks just fine at shortstop. We know he can play some second base as well, so we're going to play both. But Kevin, he gets in the box, like, he looks like a hitter. I know it's like kind of an old school scout saying, like, if I was writing up a report, it's just like hitterish, man. He looks like a hitter and gets his ace swing off more often than not. And it's been fun to watch. Now that Kevin's there, those guys have a great relationship, and watching them at that top of that lineup is a lot of fun.
Talk about Braceno, because if we're going to talk about the 1-hitter and the 2-hitter, we might as well talk about the sweetest swinging 3-hitter. So
yeah, he's, again, I think I'll start with defense again. I mean, I spent my time when I'm with the younger players, I will actually go down and do a little more baseball sort of skill work than I would at the upper levels. But I talked to him about catching. I mean, and I was sort of that fringy, like, could I catch, could I not player all along, and told him, I mean, he knows, like, he wants to be a catcher. We want him to be a catcher. The bat is really special. We don't think he's ever going to lose that. And then, we talked a little about being a catcher. I told, we just talked to him, like, it's not just your throwing, it's not just receiving, which those are both coming along really well. We're really excited about the receiving numbers are coming back good on the days where it's not ABS, and he's throwing the ball well. He's got a strong arm. We just want to get it out quicker. That's coming along nicely, but it's managing his staff. It's calling the game the right way, interacting with our pitching coaches. Like, we ask a lot of our catchers, and even in A-ball, we're asking a lot of him. He's embracing it. He speaks English really well, which is, sometimes a challenge. Perfect English and understands the reports. So I'm excited about him. I mean, I think that he's got a lot to prove. Each level is going to tell us whether or not he can stay behind the plate. But everything that I'm seeing in terms of the things that we value at the major league level, receiving, blocking, throwing, game calling, like, he's passing all the marks that we need him to right now.
Another catcher we need to ask you about is Dylan Dingler in AAA Toledo. Obviously extremely athletic. Where is he at right now? Obviously, he is that third catcher on the 40-man roster. How does he put himself in the conversation of a big league debut?
Yeah, Ding, I think, look, like, the defense, like, he receives, he blocks, like, the throwing is incredible. I think they were like 75% throwing people out when Dingler's catching. And the pitchers have a big part to do with that. Like, we really stressed in spring training, controlling the running game. But Ding's throws have been strong and accurate. The offensive profile, and I think with Ding, what I like is, like, I think he's starting to understand what kind of hitter he is. He's going to walk, and he's going to hit for power, and he's going to defend. That is a very valuable player in 2024 behind the plate. And Ding's, you can see it, like, he's starting to be gain some confidence. He's starting, even when a guy like Matt Manning or Devin Sweet or Andrew Vasquez or Win Genser's pitching, like, he's control, even the older guys now, like, he's calling a really good game. And the conversation he's having with our older pitchers, that he's growing up right in front of our eyes. It's just hitting, making sure, like, there's enough contact between the walks and the the power comes without reaching for it too much. But I think when you look around the game of baseball at where the catching position is, it's nice to have a guy like Ding waiting in the wings.
For sure. And then 3 other players, Jace Young, Justin Henry Malloy, Justice Bigby, grouping all those 3 together. I know it's not only you that's making the decisions, right? It's a collective decision that you guys are making on all these players as to when they're ready. But what are you looking for out of each of those players, Jace Young, Malloy, Bigby, and how they make that next step and get to the big leagues?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jace, the position change part or just having some versatility where you can play third and second, it's going really well. He's playing a lot of third base, and the one thing he needed to do was just play third base, right? We can hit him a million ground balls, and as much as we try to simulate game speed and work before the game, it's nothing like just playing the game. And I think the plays where he's learning the most on are like the ball off the end of the bat that's got some spin to it, or like the high chopper where he needs to come get it. And he can't, the clock is a little bit different at third than it is at second, and that's exactly what AAA is for, and he's learning every night, every inning we can get there over at third. I think he learns something and he gets better. The second base defense remains really good, and look, like AAA, Double A, AAA is a big jump, and AAA, the big leagues, is a massive jump. And so Jace, I think he's learning to, especially in April, most of the pitchers in AAA have major league time. And he's learning that, pitchers can land their off speed whenever they want. They don't have to throw you a fastball at all. Fastball usage is way down in AAA, just like it is in the big leagues. And Jace hammers fastball. So he's learning to pick his spots and to not miss fastballs. And then also he's doing a little bit better job on hunting some off speed and having a little bit more kind of major league, like a second part approach of like, hey, maybe I might need to sit off speed here. And we're starting to see him do some of that. But the power has been pretty incredible, especially in April when the ball doesn't really carry that well in Toledo. So he's off to a nice start with work on and continue to get better. Justin Henry Malloy, it's all outfield now. I think that's really helped him. He's doing a pretty good job out in both corners. The arm plays much better out there than I think we thought at first. So, he just continue to get innings, continue to play both corners, work every day there. Offensively, I think, I hate to use it as an excuse, but April's hard. I mean, there was so much rain, the weather. I think we all we had a lot of guys get out to a slow start in Toledo just because we don't even have BP on the field most nights. But, we're starting to see Justin get right back to where he left off at the end of last year. I think that, offensively, the only thing left for him to do is pick up the phone and go to Detroit and see if he can contribute offensively there as much. And that's, look, like you said, all we can do is get him ready. I think Justin, has proven to all of us that when the at bats are there, I think regular at bats are still important for him. That I think he can contribute. And then Bigby flew through the minor leagues last year. I think defensively still, working every day. He moved from first base to corner outfield. He is the one guy I will say the top line numbers didn't start off great in April. All of his underlying numbers, we've already talked about a little bit. Process and outcomes, like his underlying numbers are really good. You're starting to see his top line numbers get better. He was just pretty unlucky that the first 3 weeks. Bigby's got, it went so fast. I think now he's starting to realize, you go from the fun story of shooting through the system out of nowhere to, what an established, AAA / major league option. And he's got to start believing that. And consistency of the performance and consistency of the AB need to equal enough for us to really be okay, we think we can get this out of him at the next level.
Ryan, before we get out of here, and you've been so generous to talk about so many different things, you've touched on this, and I wanted to ask you about it. The chasm between AAA and the major leagues, to me, has never been wider. And it's highlighted to me in a way. Look, there's some really good rookies in Major League Baseball this year. Almost to a man, they're struggling. Forget Holiday for a second. But as an example, Cole Keith was about as polished and great a hitting prospect in the minor leagues as you could possibly get. Mm-hmm. His at-bats are still pretty good in the major leagues, but man, hitting is hard. And there's a huge difference between AAA and the major leagues. And as somebody that did it yourself and who watches it every day, give a short explanation and enlighten some people that listen to this pod about how hard and how much different the skill level is between the two levels.
Yeah. Yeah. You said it best. I was in a meeting. Gosh, I think it might have been in Anaheim a few years ago. We were talking about that gap and a really experienced scout who's a really good scout's been doing it for a long time. He said just what you said. The gap has always been big, and now it is a million miles apart. And I think it's two things. Like I've honestly spent some time on this. I think shrinking down to 4 affiliates and losing the short season affiliates, it is forcing teams like us included, even when we don't want to, like we're moving players faster than we had in the past. We lost the New York Penn League, and that ability to throttle players a little bit and give them more at bats and more innings to get to the higher level. So I think players are racing to AA like really fast, like more fast than they ever have. So then you sort of stop at AA, and as a young player, then you kind of have to prove that you can do it. But then eventually a lot of those younger players are getting into AAA and still with a ton of development left. I think, I hate to say this, back when I played, but when I played, I do think, I got to a AAA team with 20 veterans that probably had service time and 5 young kids. It was like Grady Sizemore and Brandon Phillips and Johnny Peralta. But then the guys on our team were Ernie Young and Dusty Wathan, guys that had major league service time that were, 4A type of players. That was the majority of the team and the pitching staff. Now it's probably flipped where you have 5 or 6 4A depth type players and 19 kids that it's their first time in AAA. I don't have like a comment. Well, like that's just where the game has gone. I think that's every team like that sort of that mid class, like upper level player. Those guys either stick in the big leagues or they're, we're going with young players. I think that's a really big part of it. I think the other part of it is just the pitching is so good. We're all so good at developing pitching. The one thing Colt said, and I saw Colt the other day, he's like, there's no easy at bats anymore. And they're in the big leagues. Like there is not one at bat you're going to get up a pitcher that doesn't have either like crazy, even the bad, quote unquote, bad relievers, especially in the big leagues, are probably throwing 95 with like mega ride or mega sink. And we can create, we can create a lot of really interesting shapes, and guys do throw really hard. And you can go to the Atlantic League right now and find some guys that have probably are throwing really, really hard and bring them in, and major league arms. They're just pitching's, we all know, the pitching's just beating up the hitters now. And there's no way to simulate it in AAA. Like we've tried a million, we talk about this a lot. Like how can we simulate, but how do you simulate, Crochet's release and fastball and that stuff and that slider? Like it's hard to do. And then, I remember when Kerry Carpenter got called up and we were in Chicago, and I just happened to be on the trip, and it was Kopech, Cease, and somebody else throwing 100. And it's like it's like you can never see that in AAA. And that was Kerry's weekend. It's like, hey, there's your 3 starts, like against 3 elite, pitchers. You're not gonna see a fastball below 95 with incredible off speed. And then the bullpen's just as nasty. It's hard. The only way to do it is go do it. And I think Cole hit too. I think the underlying stuff's been great. Like you said, the underlying metrics are good. I like his swing, but he's, whether it's Holiday or Colt or any of these young players, until you see it, the pitching jump is bigger than it's ever been.
That's really good stuff. Thank you for explaining that, because that's something that jumps out to us all the time, is there is this huge difference. And we talk about pitching being pitching is the part that you're obviously able to tweak with and tinker and find shapes, and then hitting is the reactionary part of the sport. It's almost kind of like these guys are left out there to die sometimes, but that's kind of how the game goes, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, that's all the time we have for Ryan, but look, man, we really appreciated your time. Hopefully we can get you back on the podcast at some point in the future to check in about all these players that the Tigers are developing in the minor leagues this season. It's been great. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back.
Ryan, I had a blast. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. We can just get maybe late in the year and see where all these kids are at. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. We're already looking forward to it. So we'll get you back on again sometime soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good to meet you, Mark. See you, Evan. I'll see you out there.
You too, man.